Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants applause. Everybody wants validation. But let me tell you something most people are too loud to hear. The strongest moves you will ever make are made in silence. If people can hear you coming, they can prepare. If they can see your plans, they can interfere. And if they know your next step, they can try to stop it. So today, I'm not here to motivate you to talk more. I'm here to remind you why silence is power. Silence is not weakness. Silence is discipline. And discipline is the difference between people who talk about change and people who actually become something. See, weak minds are addicted to noise. They need to explain. They need to justify. They need someone to say, yeah, you're right. But disciplined minds don't operate like that. Disciplined minds understand that every word you speak before the work is finished is a leak in your focus. Every unnecessary explanation is a crack in your mental armor. Silence is you telling yourself, I trust my process enough not to advertise it. Silence is restraint, and restraint is power. When you don't react to every comment, when you don't respond to every doubt, when you don't announce every move, you're not shrinking, you're sharpening, you're conserving energy, you're choosing control over chaos. Most people mistake loudness for confidence, but the truth is, confidence doesn't need witnesses. Confidence doesn't need approval. Confidence moves quietly, precisely, and with intention. Look at how undisciplined people move. They speak before they act. They promise before they prepare. They announce before they achieve. And then when life hits them, when obstacles show up, when pressure exposes their lack of foundation, they fall apart publicly because they built nothing privately. Discipline says, I will not speak until my actions are undeniable. Discipline says, I don't need to be understood right now. And that's hard, because the ego wants credit before the work is done. The ego wants recognition early. The ego wants reassurance. But discipline kills the ego daily. Discipline understands that validation is a distraction, not a reward. When you stay silent, you starve the ego and feed the mission. You stop performing for people who aren't qualified to judge your journey. You stop giving access to people who haven't earned insight into your life. Silence is you drawing a line and saying, this part of me is under construction, and construction zones are closed to the public. Most people talk because they're afraid of being forgotten, afraid of being doubted, afraid that if they don't speak up, nobody will notice them. But disciplined individuals understand something different. The loudest people in the room are usually the least prepared. They talk to cover insecurity. They talk to feel important. They talk because silence forces self-reflection. And self-reflection is uncomfortable when you haven't done the work. Silence forces you to sit with your shortcomings. It forces you to face your excuses. It forces you to confront the gap between who you are and who you say you want to be. That's why most people avoid it. But that's exactly why you must embrace it. Because growth doesn't happen in noise. Growth happens when it's just you, your standards, and your commitment. No audience, no applause, just truth. Silence gives you that truth without filters. Discipline also means emotional control. When someone doubts you and you feel that urge to respond, to prove, to defend, silence is choosing mastery over impulse. It's saying, I don't need to win this conversation. I need to win my life. Arguments feel productive, but they rarely are. Explaining yourself feels powerful, but it rarely changes minds. Silence, on the other hand, shifts the battlefield. It removes you from pointless battles and places you back into purposeful action. You stop bleeding energy into people who benefit from your reaction. You stop negotiating with opinions. You stop letting other people's disbelief dictate your emotional state. That's discipline. That's maturity. That's strength. Silence trains you to respond only when it matters, to speak only when it adds value, to move only when it aligns with your mission. Silence is also strategic. When you talk too much, you give people a map to your mind. You reveal your insecurities, your timelines, your weaknesses. Discipline says information is leverage, and I don't give leverage away for free. When you move in silence, people underestimate you. They misjudge you. They think you're stagnant. They think you're doing nothing. And that's the advantage. While they're busy watching mouths, you're busy building skill. While they're distracted by appearances, you're stacking competence. While here reacting emotionally, you're progressing methodically. Silence creates space. Space to think clearly. Space to plan deeply. Space to execute without interference. And in that space, transformation happens quietly but decisively. And here's the part most people don't realize. Silence builds self-trust. When you stop talking and start doing, you begin to rely on your actions instead of your words. You stop lying to yourself with motivation and start telling the truth through discipline. Every quiet win reinforces belief. Every unseen effort strengthens identity. You no longer need to convince yourself or anyone else of who you're becoming. You know. And knowing is different than hoping. Knowing doesn't shake when challenges show up. Knowing doesn't crumble under doubt. Knowing doesn't seek reassurance. Silence gives you that knowing. It strips away performance and leaves you with substance. It teaches you to stand alone without feeling lonely, to move forward without applause, to become dangerous without making noise. The moment you speak a dream out loud, you invite the world into something that is still fragile. Dreams in their early stages are like open wounds. They don't need air, they need protection. Most people don't understand this, so they talk, they announce, they post, they share before the idea has muscles. And then they wonder why their motivation fades. It fades because every dream spoken too early becomes exposed to opinions that were never meant to shape it. People hear your vision and immediately filter it through their own fears, their own failures, their own ceilings. They don't respond to your potential, they respond to their past. And without realizing it, you start carrying the weight of their doubt. Silence would have kept that weight off your shoulders. Silence would have allowed the dream to grow uninterrupted, untouched, unchallenged before it was ready to stand on its own. Most doubters don't even mean harm. That's what makes them dangerous. They sound reasonable. They say things like, I just want you to be safe, or I don't want you to get disappointed, or I'm just being honest. But honesty without vision is limitation. Safety without growth is stagnation. Their caution comes from places where they quit, not places where they won. And when you listen too closely, you start adjusting your dream to make other people comfortable. You shrink timelines, you lower standards, you compromise ambition. Not because you believe less in yourself, but because you don't want conflict. Silence protects you from this slow erosion. When you keep your dreams private, they stay pure. They stay yours. They don't get reshaped by fear disguised as advice. There is also a psychological cost to talking too much about what you plan to do. The mind is strange. It rewards intention, almost the same way it rewards action. When you talk about your goals and people nod, praise you, or encourage you, your brain gets a hit of satisfaction. It feels like progress, even though nothing has happened yet. That false sense of achievement kills urgency. It makes you feel ahead of where you actually are. And then when it's time to work, the hunger isn't as sharp. The edge is gone. Silence keeps the hunger alive. Silence keeps the pressure on. When nobody knows what you're building, there's no emotional payout until the work is done. That's when effort stays honest. That's when discipline replaces talk. That's when results actually begin to form. Another truth people avoid is that some doubters are not confused. They're threatened. Your growth forces them to look at their own stagnation. Your ambition highlights their excuses. So instead of dealing with their own lives, they try to manage yours. They question your choices. They mock your seriousness. They downplay your goals. Not because your dream is impossible, but because your discipline makes them uncomfortable. Silence takes away their stage. It denies them access to your inner world. It stops them from planting seeds of doubt that don't belong to you. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving insecure people something to attack. You reclaim control of your narrative by refusing to narrate it at all. When dreams stay quiet, they grow stronger roots. You work differently when nobody is watching. There's less pressure to perform, and more freedom to experiment, fail, adjust, and try again. You don't feel rushed to prove anything. You're not chasing applause. You're chasing mastery. And mastery requires patience. It requires repetition. It requires looking foolish in private, so you don't look unprepared in public. Silence gives you permission to be a beginner without judgment. It lets you be bad at something long enough to become great at it. Loud dreams crave validation. Quiet dreams crave excellence. And excellence doesn't ask for attention. It demands respect when it finally shows up. Over time, something powerful happens. The same people who once doubted in silence begin to notice in awe, not because you explain better, not because you convinced them, but because your progress speaks a language they can't argue with. Results end conversations that words never could. And that's the real victory. Not proving people wrong, but outgrowing the need to prove anything at all. Silence wasn't avoidance, it was strategy. It wasn't fear, it was wisdom. By keeping your dreams private, you didn't weaken them, you fortified them. You allowed them to mature without interference, to rise without permission, and to stand without needing anyone's belief, but your own. Growth is not pretty. It doesn't announce itself with confidence or arrive wrapped in certainty. Growth starts as confusion. It starts as discomfort. It starts as you realizing that the old version of you can't carry the new life you want. And that realization hurts. Most people quit right there. They mistake discomfort for failure. They mistake uncertainty for a sign to stop, but that messy, awkward, frustrating phase is not a warning, it's an invitation. An invitation to stretch beyond what's familiar. An invitation to rebuild your identity from the inside out. The problem is, nobody applauds you in this phase. There's no recognition for trying, no celebration for learning, no validation for being in between. And because it feels lonely and unrewarded, people retreat back to what they know, back to what feels safe, back to who they used to be. This is the phase where you feel behind, even when you're moving forward. You look around and everyone else seems ahead. They look confident, they look established, they look certain. But what you don't see is their process. You only see their highlight, not their history. And comparison becomes poison. You start questioning your pace. You start doubting your ability. You start wondering if you made a mistake by choosing growth instead of comfort. But growth doesn't run on your timeline. It runs on transformation. It strips you before it strengthens you. It breaks patterns before it builds power. That feeling of being lost isn't a lack of direction. It's proof that you've left the old map behind. You're not stuck, you're recalibrating. There will be moments when you don't recognize yourself. Your old habits won't fit anymore, but your new ones won't feel natural yet. You'll feel clumsy in your discipline, awkward in your confidence, unsteady in your choices. That's because growth requires repetition without reassurance. You have to show up before it feels right. You have to commit before you feel ready. And that internal friction, that tension between who you were and who you're becoming, is exhausting. It's easier to quit than to sit in that discomfort. But if you quit, you don't return to peace. You return to regret, because once you've seen what's possible, going back hurts more than pushing through. Nobody warns you about the loneliness of growth. When you change, your environment doesn't change with you. Your conversations start feeling shallow. Your old routines feel empty. Your circle may not understand your seriousness. And you begin to outgrow spaces before you outgrow people. That isolation can feel like punishment, but it's actually preparation. Solitude sharpens awareness. It forces you to listen to your own voice instead of the crowd. It teaches you self-reliance. When you're stripped of external validation, you learn how to validate yourself. And that skill becomes armor later, when pressure increases and expectations rise. Growth isolates before it elevates, because strength built in solitude lasts longer. There will also be setbacks, moments when progress seems to reverse, days when motivation disappears, weeks when results don't show. That's when doubt gets loud. It whispers that you're wasting time, that you're not built for this, that you should return to what's easy. But setbacks are not signs of incompetence. They're tests of commitment. Growth is not linear, it spirals. It revisits old weaknesses at higher levels. Each time you face them, you're stronger than before, even if it doesn't feel like it. What matters is not how you feel in those moments, but whether you continue despite the feeling. Discipline in the absence of motivation is what turns struggle into strength. One day, almost without realizing it, things start to click. The habits feel natural, the confidence feels earned, the skills feel integrated. And people look at you and say it happened fast, not knowing how many ugly days were buried beneath that moment. That's the illusion of overnight success. But you know the truth. You remember the confusion, the self-doubt, the nights when quitting felt logical. And that's what makes the growth permanent. Because it wasn't borrowed confidence, it was built. It wasn't luck, it was endurance. The ugliness wasn't a flaw in the process, it was the process. What you do when nobody is watching is the truest reflection of who you are. Not when the lights are on, not when the room is full, not when there's praise attached, but when it's quiet, when there's no accountability except your own word. That's where real power is built. Private work strips away performance and exposes intention. There's no audience to impress, so the only question that matters is whether you're willing to show up anyway. Most people aren't. They need visibility to feel motivated. They need recognition to feel validated, but dominance is born in obscurity. It's forged in routines, repeated without reward. It's created in moments that feel insignificant, but compound over time into something unstoppable. Private work is uncomfortable because it offers no immediate feedback, no applause, no likes, no external signal that you're doing the right thing, just effort and faith. You have to believe that what you're doing matters before anyone else does. And that belief is rare. That's why so few people reach the top. They can't tolerate the silence long enough. They quit because it feels pointless. But nothing powerful is ever built in a rush. Mastery demands patience. It demands repetition when results are invisible. Every quiet hour you put in is a deposit. You may not see the balance growing, but interest is compounding. And one day, the return shocks everyone, including you. There is a different standard you hold yourself to when the work is private. You can't fake effort. You can't hide behind appearances. You either did the work or you didn't. That honesty is brutal, but it's necessary. It builds integrity. It builds consistency. You start respecting yourself because you keep promises no one else knows about. And self-respect is a dangerous thing, in the best way. When you respect yourself, you move differently, you speak differently, you tolerate less, you don't chase validation because you've already earned your own trust. Public success without private discipline collapses under pressure. But private discipline creates a foundation so strong that public pressure can't crack it. Private work also allows you to fail safely, to experiment, to refine, to be terrible without being judged. That freedom is priceless. When you're not worried about how you look, you focus on how you improve. You can make mistakes without shame. You can analyze without ego. You can restart without embarrassment. This is how real skill is developed. This is how confidence becomes unshakable, because it's rooted in experience, not praise. When you've struggled privately, you don't fear exposure publicly. You've already faced your worst moments alone. The stage doesn't intimidate you when you've already survived the darkness. Public dominance often looks effortless, but it's anything but. What people call talent is usually just preparation they didn't witness. They see the result and assume ease. They don't see the repetition, the frustration, the boredom, the discipline. They don't see the mornings when quitting would have been easier. And that's fine, they're not supposed to. You didn't do the work for their understanding. You did it for your freedom. When you dominate publicly, it's not about proving superiority. It's about expressing preparation. You're calm under pressure because pressure feels familiar. You've trained there, you've lived there. The real reward of private work isn't recognition. It's control. Control over your emotions, control over your reactions, control over your future. You stop depending on motivation because you've built systems. You stop hoping for opportunities because you've built capability. And capability creates leverage. When you've done the work in private, you don't rush outcomes. You don't beg for chances. You don't fear competition. You know what you've put in. And that quiet certainty changes everything. Energy is not unlimited. It is not emotional. It is not renewable on command. Energy is currency, and every single day you are spending it whether you realize it or not. The problem is most people spend it recklessly. They waste it on conversations that don't matter, arguments that don't change anything, and reactions that don't move their life forward. They wake up tired, not because they didn't sleep, but because they've been leaking energy everywhere, explaining themselves to people who don't listen, defending decisions to people who don't support them, reacting emotionally to situations that don't deserve access to their inner world. Discipline begins when you realize that not everything deserves a response. Silence, restraint, and focus are not passive. They are protective. Every time you choose not to engage, you're not being weak, you're preserving power. Arguments are one of the most expensive places to spend your energy. They feel productive, but they rarely are. They inflate the ego while draining the spirit. You can win a debate and still lose momentum. You can prove a point and still fall behind in life. Most arguments aren't about truth. They're about control, pride, and validation. And when you participate, you give your energy to someone else's emotional chaos. You allow them to pull you into their frame instead of staying grounded in your own purpose. Mastery means recognizing when something is not worth the cost. When your mission is clear, distractions become obvious. You stop trying to be right and start trying to be effective. And effectiveness requires energy, not noise. Explaining yourself is another silent drain. Every time you feel the need to justify your choices, You hand your power away. You subconsciously place other people in the position of judge and yourself in the position of defendant. That dynamic is exhausting. It keeps you mentally tied to opinions that don't build your future. People who are committed to misunderstanding you will never be convinced, no matter how well you explain. And people who respect you don't need explanations in the first place. When you stop over-explaining, you reclaim mental space. You stop rehearsing conversations that never happen. You stop reliving moments that already passed. That saved energy doesn't disappear. It gets redirected into action, clarity, and progress. Emotional reactions are the most expensive habit of all. They feel automatic, but they are trained responses. Someone says something, does something, doubts you, questions you, and instantly your mood shifts. Your focus breaks. Your day derails. That's not strength, that's vulnerability. Emotional control doesn't mean suppression. It means choice. It means you decide what gets access to your internal state. When you react impulsively, you give external events authority over your inner world. When you respond intentionally or don't respond at all, you keep authority. That control compounds. Over time, you become unshakable, not because nothing affects you, but because you don't let everything affect you. Energy spent proving yourself is energy stolen from becoming yourself. The need to prove comes from insecurity, not ambition. When you are deeply committed to growth, you don't chase validation, you chase skill. You don't seek recognition, you seek mastery. Proving is loud and temporary. Building is quiet and permanent. Every minute spent trying to show others your worth is a minute not spent increasing it. The most powerful people in any room are not the ones talking the most. They're the ones who don't need to. Their presence carries weight because their energy hasn't been scattered. It's concentrated, focused, refined. They've invested it where it multiplies instead of where it evaporates. When you start spending energy wisely, your life changes rhythm. You feel calmer, not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer fighting unnecessary battles. Your focus sharpens. Your decisions become cleaner. You stop feeling drained by people because you stop giving them unrestricted access. That conserved energy fuels discipline. Discipline fuels consistency. Consistency fuels results. And results create leverage. At that point, you don't need to argue, explain, or react. Your position is already established. You move with intention. You speak with purpose. And when you choose silence, it's not avoidance, it's precision. There comes a moment when effort turns into evidence. Not because you announced it, not because you explained it, but because the work finally has weight. Winning so loud doesn't mean being flashy or arrogant. It means your progress becomes undeniable. It means your life starts answering questions you never responded to. People notice shifts before they hear words. They notice confidence in how you walk, clarity in how you speak, discipline in how you move. Loud winning is not about noise, it's about presence. It's when your results occupy space, when your growth changes the temperature of every room you enter. Silence makes sense then, because there's nothing left to clarify. Your life has become the message. Most people think winning is a single moment, a breakthrough, a milestone, a visible achievement. But loud winning is cumulative. It's built from thousands of quiet decisions stacked on top of each other. Decisions to train when nobody cared, to study when nobody watched, to improve when nobody believed. Each of those moments felt insignificant on its own. But together, they created momentum. And momentum changes how the world responds to you. Suddenly, doors open without you knocking. Opportunities appear without you asking. Respect replaces skepticism. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Silence becomes natural at this stage because speaking would actually dilute the impact. Words would shrink what actions have already expanded. There's a shift that happens internally when you start winning for real. You stop needing external acknowledgement to feel grounded. You stop craving validation because you've validated yourself through consistency. The hunger changes. Early on, you want people to notice. Later, you want peace. You want alignment. You want control over your time, your energy, your direction. Loud winning gives you that control, not because you dominated others, but because you mastered yourself. And once you've done that, there's no urge to brag. Bragging is insecurity trying to be seen. Silence at this level is security that doesn't need witnesses. What confuses people is that the louder the win, the quieter the winner often becomes. That's not coincidence, that's maturity. When you've been through the process, you understand how fragile beginnings are and how heavy success can be. You don't rush to speak because you've learned the cost of attention. You know that not everyone deserves access. You know that not every opinion deserves a response. So you let people talk, you let assumptions form, you let narratives run wild. Because none of it changes your reality. Your focus is no longer on being understood. It's on staying disciplined enough to maintain what you built. At this level, silence isn't avoidance. It's efficiency. You don't explain how hard it was, because struggle is part of the price. You don't justify why you deserve it, because merit already paid the bill. You don't compete verbally, because competition is happening in results. Loud winning creates a gap between you and the noise. And in that gap, you gain clarity. You see who's genuinely curious and who's just watching. You see who respects the work and who only respects outcomes. Silence becomes a filter. It protects your momentum from distractions disguised as interest. And here's the truth most people never reach. When you win loud enough, you don't need to announce anything ever again. Your existence becomes the announcement. Your discipline becomes the explanation. Your consistency becomes the proof. Silence is no longer a strategy, it's a byproduct, a natural state. Because when your life reflects alignment, purpose, and progress, words become optional. You're no longer trying to convince the world of who you are. You already know. And that knowing is louder than anything you could ever say.